All right, so you got your Grenadier lift and you're gonna install it. So Eibach has this instruction sheet. You can go by the instruction sheet. You're gonna notice on one of their documents, it tells you about damaging the drive shaft. So I'm gonna show you how we do the installation here and what you need to be made aware of. So come on underneath here and I'll walk you through some things. Just so you know, if you're going by their instructions, you're gonna need a good set of these coil spring compressors, and you need a good set. I'm gonna show you, it's up on a lift, so you need to have access to be able to pick your vehicle up and down. So if you're doing this in your driveway, you gotta figure that out, but we use a full lift. This lift is very capable, 16,000 pounds. So hop underneath here. One of the things you're gonna do, you are going to need to remove this upper track bar bolt completely. So you make sure you have tools to do that. You're gonna need to remove the sway bar completely. So this, one of the ends will need to be removed. We just removed this lower end. And you're gonna need to loosen all of these pivots. So there is a pivot here, pivot there, pivot there, pivot there. The more you loosen those up, the easier everything will flex out when you get to the final stage. You are then gonna come in and on your brake lines, you're gonna see these brake lines. There's some brake lines, there's just some little 10mm head bolts up there. They're 6mm bolts with 10mm heads. You're gonna unbolt those there, and you're gonna unbolt them from there. So this brake line is completely slack. You're also gonna notice we did not take the wheels off the vehicle yet, and you don't need to when you're putting the coil in. So those components there need to be loosened. The main thing right here, you are gonna remove the front CV from the front drive shaft. It's a T40, I believe. So you're gonna remove this completely, and you're gonna bungee cord up out of the way, up into here. We do not want this flange or that flange, mainly that flange up in there, to get damaged. So with all those components loosened up and not removed, the other components removed, you're gonna be ready for the last step in the front, which is lowering or removing this bolt here. It's a big bolt, I think it's 24mm. You're gonna remove the lower shock bolt. Again, the tires and wheels are still on the vehicle. So you're gonna, again, for the rear, you're gonna loosen all the pivots, upper and lower on both sides. You are gonna remove the upper track bar bolt, which is right up here. Remove this completely. You're gonna remove the sway bar link at the lower end. Remove that completely. For your brake lines, you're gonna remove this brake line bolt here. You're gonna remove it up there at the top. You're actually gonna remove it where there's these two studs. Come on over here. There's actually, I think there's two nuts up here that you remove this and you allow this to flex down. On this side, you're gonna remove the brake tab here, and you can go ahead and remove it at the top as well. Last step, remove the lower shock mount. Now when you remove the lower shock mount, you can have the vehicle actually, you want the vehicle on the ground. You want the tires sitting on the ground. Once you remove that, then what you do is you pick the vehicle up by the chassis. For us, we pick it up here, and that just allows us, the tires are on the ground, the chassis will then go in the air, and we separate it in the air like this. So the tires are both on the ground, the coils fall right out, you pop in the new coils. You might need a little bit of help from somebody in the shop or your neighbor if you're doing it at your house. They may need to put a little bit of pressure holding the tire down on the ground. All right, so we've showed you how and what we want you to loosen up underneath the vehicle to get the coils in. So here's our new Eibach coil that we're gonna be putting in this vehicle. I'm gonna have Phil lift up the vehicle. So this can either be done on your driveway. If you're doing it on your driveway, you're only be able to lift up one time, one front or rear at a time. This one's on a lift. You notice here we've got our CV bolts here, drive shaft disconnected. That is the key thing. So Phil, go ahead and lift her up. I'm gonna show you how easy it is. We'll also take a look at the difference in the coils between these two. Brake lines are all done. So your coil comes right out. You're gonna kind of notice our free length's about the same in these two coils, but this is a larger wire diameter. It's also slightly longer. So basically a coil, all it is a long bar of material. The longer the bar is, the softer it is. So they do increase the wire diameter quite a bit. I believe that these are the 1.7s. These are roughly about 15% firmer than stock, but we still have about the same ride height, so this is gonna hold it up more. So I'm gonna put the new one in, and you'll see it just pops right in, and you're done. So with all that, everything underneath the vehicle, disconnected, loosened up, we get clear and clean access to removing the coils. Again, remove the front drive shaft CV at the differential, get it up out of the way. This thing drooped out. We don't even take off the wheels and tires. And when you get this thing back on the ground, when you go to hook things up, we'll show you how to hook up your track bar. That can be a little bit tricky, but there's a simple, easy solution to that. When the tires are on the ground, have somebody get in the vehicle, steer it back and forth, lines the track bar right up. Okay, so the rear's gonna be a little bit trickier, but we're still not having to compress the coil. So all your brake lines are loose, track bar's disconnected, whatnot. So you have to come in here, kind of pick up on the spring. It's gonna come unseated, it's gonna drop down, and you're gonna remove it. And that's that. So now once again, you're gonna see where the heights of the springs are really similar. So it's gonna be fairly easy to put it right back in the same hole. We didn't have to compress anything. We didn't have to remove brake calipers, wheels, anything. It's an advantage having the wheel still installed because if you need to, you can even push down on the wheel with it up off the ground. Okay, so when we put the coil back in, you're gonna need a friend, so I'm gonna have Phil go underneath. It's a little tricky to get the donut installed, so we just have one of the technicians, when you're loading the coil up in there, simultaneously install the donut up top. If you're doing this by yourself, you could probably stick some stickum or something on there. Phil's helping me guide it up in. And we're done, we're in. So at this point, you need 2 people. It's a little awkward getting in the coil in there, but it's gonna be that way either way. Again, we're not using spring compressors. We're not taking the calipers off, having to bleed the brakes, any of that. All the brake lines and everything are nice and loose, even though it's drooped out. Our rear drive shaft's fine because of the length of it, so we're not putting the rear drive shaft into a bind when it's drooped out this far. And once you get the other side in, that's gonna be a little bit trickier, so be patient. You got the fuel tank to deal with. Get your shocks, put it back on the ground, get your shock back into position, put everything back on there. Again, we've removed the track bar at the top of the frame. That allows this rear end to just drop right down, give you plenty of clearance to install the coils without using a spring compressor. Okay, so even though I mentioned this side being a little bit more difficult, actually it turned out pretty easy. Load the spring in through the back without the track bar there, sway bar out of the way. We're able to load it in and out of the back. On the driver's side, you have to load it through the front because the track bar bracket's there. With this, it actually loaded really nicely through the back. And honestly, it was easier. So disregard what I said earlier about the passenger side being a little bit more difficult. It's actually super doable, real easy. Now we're gonna get this thing back on the ground, get it torqued. It's gonna be key when they put this thing back on the ground that we're gonna do our final torque for everything when it's sitting at ride height too. You don't want all those bushings in a bind. So it's gonna come up a little bit. We're gonna set this thing down, give it a little bouncy bounce, then we'll go and retorque everything. So. All right, happy trails, everybody.